A message of congratulations, announcing that someone has successfully earned the right to reincarnate. A mission is presented. They are required to save the prince's life. We then see a woman with glasses who reflects that she has thought about this before and muses that it would be nice to be reincarnated in another world for her new incarnation. She reacts with total disbelief, finding the situation unreal. The mission is then expanded, revealing she must also fall in love. A final message wishes for her happiness, to which she tentatively agrees. We see the woman from her previous life, looking cautious with her glasses and ponytail, speaking to a goddess-like figure. The woman looks skeptical and asks if she possesses the right to refuse this offer. She thinks about her cautious nature, explaining that in her past life she always had to check contracts thoroughly before signing them. The goddess, looking annoyed, states that this situation is unprecedented and troublesome, urging the woman to please just reincarnate. The woman looks down with a slight smile and agrees that it's fine, as she surprisingly has no regrets about her previous life. The woman then asks the goddess why she was chosen for this. The goddess explains it was because she appeared strong and robust. The woman, still not convinced, admits that while she knows she isn't frail, she doubts that reason. She wonders if perhaps she was already prepared to reincarnate. The goddess clarifies that her memories are still there, but she has simply become less attached to her past life for the sake of her mental health, which makes the woman say, "Oh, really?" The woman then considers the mission's difficulty, noting she has to both save the prince and fall in love, which is visualized by a silhouette of a romantic couple. The goddess reassures her, promising to give her a beautiful appearance and a divine blessing. The goddess claps her hands happily and explains the plan. The woman will be reborn in a magical world as a noble daughter. She will also receive a special blessing that will grant one wish, just once. Her main task is to pray for a dying prince's healing when she eventually meets him. The goddess adds that, just in case, she will also be born into a pharmacist family and will be given a recovery magic skill. The woman notes that this is more than enough. The goddess then reveals the real reason for all this. A senior goddess who writes scenarios isn't good with sad stories, so an easy love simulation reincarnation system was initiated. The woman is shocked and asks what she means by a scenario. Her expression hardens as she angrily asks if she is expected to play along with some god's game. The goddess frantically waves her hands, insisting it is not a game. She explains that the senior goddess just thought having a scenario would be more interesting and that she simply wants to see a story that makes people feel happy and blessed. The woman, still skeptical, asks if there are any penalties for violating this scenario. She declares that if that's the case, she refuses to accept it, as she wants to be happy on her own terms. After a moment of thought, she relents, saying she understands and will accept the terms, even though there are some things she doesn't agree with. The goddess is overjoyed, clapping her hands and exclaiming that this is good. The woman declares that she will reincarnate within that system. Relieved, the goddess says, "Then, without further ado," and sends her off with a "take care." The woman begins to float and dissolve into light, surrounded by feathers. She is completely surprised by the suddenness, shouting, "Now?" as she dematerializes. Her final thought from her old life is, "Huh," as she fades away completely. The scene changes, and we see a small, young girl sitting up in a large bed. Her room overlooks a grand mansion and snowy mountains in the distance. The girl rubs her eyes, clearly waking up in this new reality. She realizes she has been reborn as Lydia Myers. She is now the daughter of a margrave living in a frontier territory that is abundant in nature. She looks down at her new, small hands and sees her reflection, observing that she is as cute as a doll, and she silently thanks the goddess. Lydia introduces her new family. Her father is Jace, a strong man who is the leader of the Margrave family and a knight who protects their country of Nice. Her mother, Amelia, comes from a family of pharmacists that stretches back for generations. Lydia also has an older brother who is 3 years older than her. We see a happy young Lydia learning the family trade, as her mother generously shares her knowledge as a pharmacist with her. Lydia reflects on her happy new life, thinking that this easy love simulation reincarnation system is the best, and she is thankful to the goddess. This happiness is shattered, however, when Lydia turns 12 years old. A distressing scene shows her father Jace, her brother, and Lydia herself crying, begging Amelia not to leave them. Lydia's mother, Amelia, had contracted the plague and was in the last days of her life. Lydia, crying and clutching her chest, thinks about how much she loves her mother and that she cannot let her die. She remembers the goddess's blessing, which she can only use one time. She decides to use it, praying to heal her mother, while her devastated father Jace watches over Amelia's bedside. Lydia continues her desperate prayer to heal her. As divine feathers float down, her mother Amelia's eyes open, and her father looks on in shock. The blessing works, and the entire family, Lydia, her brother, and her father, joyfully embraces their recovered mother, with Lydia crying out, "Mother!" Lydia is overcome with relief and so glad that she was able to help. Her mother recovered, and their family could continue to live together. We see Amelia resting peacefully as Lydia watches over her. However, the story shows Lydia standing on a balcony, explaining that this relief was short-lived. She suddenly remembers her original mission. What is she supposed to do about the prince's life now that her one-time blessing is gone? She then recalls the goddess's other gifts and realizes she still has her recovery magic and her skills as a pharmacist. She feels confident that with these abilities, she can surely help the prince in any situation. With newfound determination, Lydia resolves to improve her recovery magic. She explains that in this world, people who can use magic are known as mages. Furthermore, those who specialize in recovery magic are revered as saints. Lydia begins to practice, but she finds that her recovery magic is quite weak. It is only strong enough to heal and purify minor cuts. She realizes she doesn't seem to have much natural magic skill, but she believes she can improve it with training. Therefore, she decides to dedicate herself to studying medicine instead, focusing on learning about diseases and the cultivation of medicinal herbs. After that decision, Lydia gave it her best effort, doing everything she possibly could. Thanks to the guidance of a new teacher, she eventually succeeds in completing an ultimate potion. This special potion has the power to dramatically extend a person's life force. Then, in the spring of her 15th year, her life is thrown into chaos once again. A neighboring country launched a sudden attack. The scene is frantic, with Lydia desperately tending to a critically injured person as someone else screams for help. People are shouting about other injured individuals and checking on the wounded. In the midst of this horror, Lydia yells out in frustration at the goddess, questioning why this is happening when the goddess claimed she wasn't good with sad stories. Just then, a soldier reports that reinforcements have arrived from the country. It is the army led by the second prince, Prince Edford. Prince Edford, despite being only 17 years old, displayed terrifying charisma on the battlefield. In the blink of an eye, the invading army was completely scattered, and peace was restored once more. But the scene shifts to Lydia at the prince's bedside. He is lying unconscious and breathing heavily. Shortly after his great victory, Prince Edford developed a mysterious illness. Lydia immediately realizes that he must be the prince from the goddess's scenario. She watches over him, observing that he is indeed very handsome and is known for being humble and kind to everyone, but she also notes that he is not her type. She finds herself in what appears to be a private room with him, though she clarifies to herself that it's just a warehouse being used for quarantine. More than anything, Lydia feels strongly that she does not want this person to die, and she feels immense guilt for having already used the goddess's one-time blessing. Prince Edford awakens and speaks to Lydia, asking if he will be cured if he drinks the medicine she is holding. Lydia confirms that he will. From her healer's perspective, she explains that his illness is a rare heart condition that only affects people who possess an excessive amount of magical power. She informs him that other patients with the same illness have been treated with this panacea. However, she must warn him that due to a limited number of similar patients, it is unknown if there are any side effects. She explains that if he drinks it, he will suffer from severe pain in his chest for 3 days and nights. The prince listens thoughtfully and asks if she is sure she wants to treat him. Lydia explains the risk. If there are any long-term after-effects, or sequelae, she will be charged with the crime of harming a member of the royal family. Despite this, she tells him her parents are prepared for that outcome and are still in favor of her administering the treatment. Prince Edford thanks her and promises he will do his best to ensure she doesn't get blamed. He then places his trust in her, saying he will leave it to her. Lydia presents the cup of medicine, admitting that it looks and tastes bad, but it is the only way to cure him, as recovery magic does not work on this specific illness. The prince looks horrified at the cup, exclaiming that it looks like poison. He remarks that its color is suspiciously similar to the hatred and anger of this world, and Lydia agrees that she thinks so too. The prince shouts, "Honestly?" adding that a pompous saint wouldn't come to a death trap like this in the first place. As the prince coughs, Lydia firmly tells him that he is the one who carries the weight of their country on his shoulders and he must not let something like an illness kill him. She also admits she would feel guilty if she let him die there. The prince clutches his chest, still refusing and saying there is no way he can drink that. Lydia presses him, asking if he truly wants to die there, especially after his recent achievement led to him being recognized as the crown prince. Lydia continues her argument, reminding him that he is a prince, not just a common knight or the Sir Black Knight. She asks if he really wants his story to end by dying in a bed instead of on the battlefield. This seems to strike a nerve. The prince looks surprised, then wordlessly grabs the cup and drinks the medicine. Lydia is completely shocked, yelling in her mind that he actually drank it, while the prince just says, yeah. A flashback reveals what really motivated him. A mysterious man in full black armor, identified as Raul, had told the prince to please drink the medicine. The prince resisted, saying, ugh. But Raul was firm, stating that he had no choice but to drink it. Raul then turned to Lydia, saying Prince Edford was next and would end up drinking it anyway, so he should just drink it quickly and recover. This advice was given while Raul handed a similar potion to a sick child, who bravely said, fine then, bring it on. Back in the present, the prince sighs, I got it, and complains to himself that Raul is really merciless. Lydia watches the prince drink the potion, thinking to herself that Sir Black Knight is a strange person. She knows that the odor and taste of the medicine are so putrid that most people would faint on the spot. The prince, however, just sips it calmly. Sir Black Knight, Raul, then asks Lydia if this is really the cure. She confirms that it is, or at least most likely. The prince finishes the entire dose in one gulp and slams the cup down on the table. He then formally thanks Lydia very much for the medicine. Lydia is stunned, wondering just how calm that guy can be. She immediately runs off, yelling for her teacher to tell him the news that Prince Edford drank the medicine. Lydia runs to her teacher, Tigrold Mulder. This person is a brilliant mage and pharmacist. He is also incredibly beautiful, so much so that he could easily pass for a lady. He welcomes Lydia back and tells her that he never doubted her. He shares good news. The 100 or so knights who were treated earlier with recovery magic are showing no abnormalities. Lydia is surprised so many were treated while she was gone. Tigrold then advises her to rest for the day. He explains that the royal army will be withdrawing completely, and the healers will be entrusted with the rest of the care. Lydia realizes this means she won't be on the front lines or treating Prince Edford anymore and won't have much to do. Lydia thinks back to how she first met her teacher. He had left his homeland to research medicine, and she had run into him while gathering medicinal herbs. She cringes as she recalls their first meeting, when he passionately explained his love for mature women. He told her that women under 50 are not his type and that he finds wrinkles and blemishes to be natural and attractive, which made her wonder what kind of pervert he was. Despite his oddities, she saw his immeasurable power, and under his guidance, her own skills as a pharmacist improved significantly. She also learned that the panacea she gave the prince was based on an elixir Tigrold had created to heal his own sister's body. However, she couldn't respect his research methods, as he was known for testing dubious drugs behind the scenes. He would test toxic concoctions on himself, believing that human test subjects were necessary and that it wasn't efficient otherwise, clearly talking from experience. But when Lydia found out he was doing all this research for his sister, she was truly moved. A memory shows her stopping him from drinking another test potion, telling him she would be sad if he collapsed and begging him to rest. Back in the present, Lydia decides to listen to her teacher's advice and rest. She feels bad for making him worry, acknowledging that he is a kind and hardworking man. She decides to first check the knight's quarters for any other injured people, though she still worries if the medicine will truly cure his highness. She discusses the plan with her teacher, who says he wants the prince to continue taking the medicine for 5 more days. Lydia is shocked by the long duration. Tigrold asks if healing the royal family is daunting, and Lydia admits it wouldn't be her first choice. She worries it's a bad idea, remarking that she's sure the prince wants to choose when he dies. Ultimately, she resolves to do it, feeling guilty towards the prince and knowing she must help him. 2 weeks into Prince Edford's treatment, he had recovered enough to not only walk but also ride a horse. As a result of the treatment, a special feeling developed between Prince Edford and Lydia. This special feeling was a beautiful one called friendship. Lydia had successfully saved the prince's life, and even though they didn't fall in love, they became good friends. She considers this a happy ending, regardless of how the goddess might feel about it. As the army prepares to leave, the prince tells Lydia that for the sake of their friendship, he will run to her every time this place becomes a battlefield, though he adds it would be a problem if that happened often. Lydia smiles and thanks him. Lydia waves goodbye, telling the prince to take care. She also bids farewell to Sir Black Knight, who replies take care, as he and the army depart. As Lydia watches them go, she stretches and wonders what she should do now that the scenario is over. She daydreams about her future, thinking that she would like to marry a strong and reliable knight, just like that Black Knight. The story concludes with Lydia reflecting that if she could go back in time, there is something she would tell her past self. She should have chosen the prince. 6 years passed after Lydia saved the prince, and in that time, she was introduced by her father to a knight from their territory and married him. She believed they were spending peaceful days together, even though their relationship had no love in it at all. This peace was shattered when her husband came to her and apologized, confessing that he had a child with the shoemaker's daughter. This news gives Lydia a throbbing headache, and she laments her terrible luck with men. She thinks to herself that she needs to get her head out of the clouds. Her husband then confuses her by saying that if they have a child, she must be with that person as soon as possible. He notices her reaction and asks if she doesn't like the idea, clarifying that he only wants to take in the child. Lydia is horrified and demands to know what will happen to the child's mother. She realizes he must be thinking of having both his mistress and their child come live together with them, and she wonders what he could possibly be thinking. Her husband then admits that he is an unfaithful husband and asks if she would be willing to raise this child with him, as the child of the Margrave Myers family. He says it's too late for regrets and promises that from this moment on, he will truly try his best to love her. Lydia is left completely baffled, wondering what he wants from her. Lydia sits in her chair, feeling so nauseous just looking at him that she can't speak. She thinks she would like to punch him but decides it would be a waste of energy. Her husband then asks if she is going to tell him to leave. Suddenly, a dark, threatening silhouette appears, asking the husband if he knows what happens when someone cheats, especially as the son-in-law of the Margrave family. The terrified husband immediately tries to backtrack, claiming it was just an impulse. Lydia recognizes the voice as her father's. Her father, Jace, draws his sword and tells Lydia to get a grip. He angrily calls the husband a bastard, furious that he would dare to disrespect his daughter. The husband is now terrified, screaming for somebody to stop her father, while Jace, in a full rage, yells at him to apologize and then die. Lydia calls out to her father, then stands up and calmly tells her husband to please leave, declaring that she is divorcing him. She thinks to herself that even with his pleading eyes, she isn't kind enough to forgive him. As her husband cries out her name, Lydia turns and walks out of the room, closing the door behind her as he calls for her one last time. Now alone, she wonders how this all happened. It has been 21 years since she reincarnated in this world, and all she ever wanted was a normal marriage. She gives a grim smile, wondering if all this misfortune is because she deviated from the goddess's original scenario. Sighing, Lydia reflects that she has now lost her second husband. We see her grinding herbs at her workplace, a small pharmacy in the Margrave territory. She is joined by her childhood friend, Natalie, who is the daughter of a wealthy merchant connected to Lydia's family. Natalie tries to comfort her, suggesting she'll find a good guy next time, but Lydia just asks why she is so unlucky with men. Natalie points out that it's unheard of for a noblewoman to be divorced twice. Lydia thinks about her second husband and admits she knew it wouldn't work from the beginning. He was a narcissistic and crazy man who, at their wedding, told her he dislikes women who are taller than him, even though she was only taller by 2 centimeters. Lydia declares that the only person she truly loves is herself. Lydia reflects that both of her marriages, the first when she was 18 and the second at 21, were arranged by her parents. Natalie comments that her parents must be very disappointed, having introduced her to unsuitable men twice now. Lydia explains that this isn't unusual for her family. While her parents are good people, they have a bad habit of choosing her partners based only on their skill with a sword. This is because their territory is often attacked by neighboring countries, so they have a preference for strong men. A flashback shows her father Jace, who, after Lydia declared she would find her own partner this time, became very determined, vowing he would be the one to find someone to make Lydia happy. Back in the present, Lydia confesses to Natalie that she is tired of marriage and worries if she'll get any decent offers now with her bad reputation, feeling the world is heartless. Her situation is complicated because her older brother, Rios, was recognized for his excellent swordsmanship and joined Prince Edford's royal guards, renouncing his family title in the process. This means Lydia is the one who must marry and eventually take over the Myers family. Natalie then changes the subject, mentioning that her sister in the royal capital told her some news. The Black Knight is retiring. Lydia is surprised, asking if it isn't too early for him to retire. Natalie explains it is due to an injury, and it seems he can no longer continue his duties as a knight. The ministers are apparently worried about his future, concerned that Raul Glaive, known as the strongest knight in the world, might just go abroad since he is still much stronger than ordinary people. Lydia quietly says, "Is that so?" Natalie then asks if Lydia had met the Black Knight long ago. Lydia remembers him, thinking that she never got to see his true face under the helmet. She vividly recalls how dashing he was when he gulped down the awful black medicine she and her teacher had created, drinking it without any hesitation. Natalie jokes that Lydia should just marry her teacher, Mr. Tigrold. Lydia, holding a potion, asks where Tigrold is, guessing he must be off chatting at the old widow's house again. A flashback shows Tigrold leaving to treat a patient with stiff shoulders, and Lydia confirms with Natalie that he was invited by his favorite patient, Viscountess Heath. Lydia then asks Natalie if she's joking, reminding her that her teacher is 53 years old. She holds up her hands with a bright smile, emphasizing he is 53, and they both share a laugh. About a month after her second divorce, Lydia's life was finally becoming calmer. She takes a walk through town, enjoying the beautiful and pleasant spring weather. However, when she greets some townspeople, they react with fear. Lydia explains that there are two reasons why people in town are frightened of her. The first reason is that she grows poisonous plants for her work. She thinks to herself that she's just on her way to wholesale medicine, and she muses that very few people seem to understand that poison and medicine are just two sides of the same coin. The second reason for her reputation seems to stem from her direct methods of medical treatment. A flashback shows her forcing medicine on a struggling patient, and she reflects that holding down an insane patient is just standard medical practice. This negative public image led to rumors spreading around the time of her first marriage, giving her the unfortunate nickname of the Poison Princess. She suspects the rumors were started by someone who was in love with her handsome ex-husband. Lydia enters a treatment center, where the ladies greet her warmly. She notes that these women are always kind to her, as she has known them since she was a little girl. One of the women tells her she's come at the right time and reveals that the ladies' secret network has uncovered some news. Lydia's father made a secret visit to Viscount Rexer's house the previous day. The secret is that her father is planning to make the Viscount's third son, Wolfgang, his new son-in-law. Lydia is horrified, thinking, "That guy?" She remembers Wolfgang as an irrational and combative person. A flashback shows him yelling at someone to get out if they won't listen to him. She thinks that even if he's strong with a sword, a selfish man like that is too much. Furious, Lydia wonders why her father is trying to marry her off to another crazy guy, especially after he has already failed twice. She declares that she will refuse this and will go visit her father immediately, steeling herself for the confrontation. Lydia immediately gets an escort from her friend Norn, apologizing for suddenly barging into the training grounds to ask for her help. She felt she had to rely on a certain person to solve this. Norn says she is fine. Lydia explains that Norn is her friend and a powerful knight, ranking among the top 5 strongest in their territory. Looking furious, Lydia confronts her father Jace at the training grounds and declares that there is no way she will ever marry another man of his choosing. Her father can only say, "Lydia," but Lydia then announces her own plan. She is going to the capital to visit her brother, Rios. She tells her father the truth is that she intends to ask Rios to arrange a meeting for her with His Highness Edford. As Norn helps Lydia with her luggage, she expresses some doubt, but Lydia explains her reasoning. She reminds Norn that this will be her third marriage, and she believes she won't be able to find a decent man without using the authority of the Crown Prince. Norn looks at her and says it's a pity. She tells Lydia that if she were a man, she would have offered to be her husband. Lydia is touched by this and smiles warmly, thinking that she would be so happy if Norn were her husband. Upon arriving in the capital, a voice suddenly exclaims, "Oh, it really is Lydia." It is Prince Edford, who greets her warmly, saying it's been a long time. He playfully ruffles her hair and tells her that he heard everything from her brother, Rios. He then remarks that she truly is terribly unlucky when it comes to men. Just then, a man with gray hair and a monocle interrupts, telling His Highness Edford that he's played around enough. He looks at Lydia with disdain and makes a rude comment about her hair giving off the rustic odor of the countryside, which annoys her. Lydia recognizes this rude man as Sir Caius, Prince Edford's chamberlain. She observes that he is a handsome man who looks just like a typical love interest from an otome game or romance novel. She also notes that he is cold towards her, which she assumes is because she is friends with the Crown Prince. Lydia decides to play along, smiling sweetly at Caius and saying, "Oh my. Sir Caius, you're still alive, I see." She thinks to herself how much he must adore Prince Edford. Prince Edford gets to the point, asking Lydia what she requires and what kind of man she is looking for. Lydia states her 3 conditions clearly. He must be strong, faithful, and able to have children. Prince Edford clears his throat, acknowledging that these are reasonable expectations for a marriage between 2 important families. He then asks if she has any more personal preferences, such as an ideal type, or specific requests for appearance or personality. Sir Caius interjects that he already knows this, while the prince assures her he would not introduce her to a weak man. Lydia adds that her family's territory is key to the nation's defense, and Edford notes that since they are a family of knights, she cannot be paired with a mage. Edford then brings up a delicate issue, pointing out that she has only been divorced for a short time. He explains that before he can introduce her to anyone, he would need to know for certain if she is pregnant with her ex-husband's child. Lydia is startled by the question but assures him it's fine. She explains that she and her ex-husband never even kissed, let alone slept together. Prince Edford is completely shocked by this. He exclaims that if he were to marry such a beautiful woman, he wouldn't even wait for the wedding night. Sir Caius looks on, remarking what a thing for the dazzling prince to say. Lydia explains her past experiences. Her first husband didn't like anyone touching his body, and her second didn't like that she was taller than him. Sir Caius looks surprisingly sympathetic, saying that her situation is unfortunate and that he feels sorry for her. Lydia is surprised that the normally cold Caius would cry for her. Lydia then playfully teases the prince, saying she heard he has been playing around freely these days. Edford immediately denies it, insisting, no anymore and claiming he is under close scrutiny. Lydia then bows formally, making her official request. She asks him to please help her find a decent person to marry. She emphasizes that all she is asking for is a decent person, and she needs his help before her father arranges another ridiculous marriage for her. Prince Edford laughs, tells her not to worry, and agrees to her request, promising to introduce her to a good man. He suggests he will choose one of his companions, promising it will be someone trustworthy in both character and swordsmanship. Lydia thanks him profusely, but she is left feeling clearly worried, wondering what exactly he means by one of his companions. Prince Edford at his desk, already regretting his promise to Lydia. He wonders aloud if he made a rash promise, and his chamberlain Caius, who is standing nearby, sarcastically asks if he is only just now realizing that. Caius points out the many difficulties, explaining that finding someone of Lydia's status is hard enough, but they also have to consider the complex political factions. They cannot, for example, choose anyone from the first prince's faction. He adds that any truly excellent swordsman, which is what her family would want, is almost certainly already engaged or married by this point. Edford then glances at Caius with an idea, suggesting him as a potential candidate. He notes that Caius is 26, only 5 years older than Lydia, and as the 3rd son of a duke, he possesses strong political backing, which is important given the rival faction trying to use the former first prince as a puppet. Caius, however, immediately and flatly refuses this suggestion. Edford sighs in frustration, wondering if finding a partner for her is even possible, admitting to himself that he knew neither Caius nor Lydia would have been interested in that match anyway. Edford tries to argue, describing Lydia as a beautiful and good-natured, if somewhat serious, young lady. He asks if her 2 failed marriages are really so bad, but then he jokingly refers to her as a worthy living sacrifice. This earns him a sharp reprimand from Caius, who tells him to watch his mouth. Caius argues that, on paper, those 2 failed marriages are an overwhelming disadvantage. Edford sheepishly concedes that Lydia does have a bad temper, but Caius dismisses this as irrelevant to his point. Just as they are arguing, a guard knocks on the door and announces a visitor. The guard informs Prince Edford that Mr. Wright has just arrived. As the prince looks up, a flash of inspiration hits him, and he thinks that this visitor is the perfect solution to his problem. At that moment, a handsome, blonde-haired man in a knight's uniform storms into the room, looking furious. He stands next to Caius and demands to know why his retirement is being blocked, stating angrily that he never applied for a simple leave of absence. Prince Edford greets the man calmly, identifying him as Raul. He observes that Raul is angry and invites him to sit down. This man is Raul Glaive, the 28-year-old 3rd son of a marquis and the commander of the First Knight Order, under the prince's direct control. Raul ignores the chair and remains standing, stating firmly that his retirement has already been publicly announced. Edford just smiles and says that he is aware of this. The prince suggests that Raul should just think of this as a long vacation, hinting that he might want to return to the knights later. Raul firmly replies that he has no reason to come back, explaining that he lost his apprentice. Edford corrects him, saying the apprentice wasn't lost, but stolen. He reminds Raul that the injury was caused by Lord Isidore's resentment and that Raul himself is not at fault. Raul rejects this, blaming himself for giving Lord Isidore an opening in the first place and asking if the prince plans to just let the man get away with it. Raul explains that his opponent is the powerful Minister of Finance, and it is simply easier for him to retire than to create a powerful enemy for the prince's faction. He also admits that if he stays, he is afraid he might lose control and kill Lord Isidore. Edford jokes that such an action is not useful in politics, but then his expression turns serious. He tells Raul there is no reason for him to blame himself. He then proposes a new idea. If Raul is so desperate to leave the Knight's Order, he knows of a witch who is currently looking for a potential sacrifice. Raul is left completely baffled by these strange words. Edford clarifies his strange proposal. He reminds Raul of the Margrave Myers territory, which Raul remembers from a battle 5 or 6 years ago. The prince suggests that Raul could be put in charge of the border fort there, and in exchange, he would be allowed to retire as he wishes. Caius, listening to the plan, nods in approval. Raul asks what this job actually entails, and Edford describes it as a simple task, becoming a sacrificial husband. His new mission would be to comfort the local healer, who is heartbroken after 2 failed marriages. Edford points out this is a perfect fit, since Raul was just planning to go off and die somewhere alone anyway. Raul drily responds that no such job exists, but Edford cheerfully insists that it does. Caius then taunts Raul, calling him pathetic for being so distraught over one apprentice's betrayal. As they bicker, Caius observes Raul's injured left arm, which hangs uselessly at his side, barely moving below the elbow. This gives Edford another idea, and he adds that the very same pharmacist in the Myers territory might be able to heal that arm. This comment finally gets Raul's full attention. Caius supports this, noting that a family with Lydia's status and resources would be a great help in healing his arm. Edford smiles, declaring it must be destiny that Raul arrived at this exact moment. Raul begins to protest, saying he isn't convinced, but Caius cuts him off. He formally states that this is now a direct order from Prince Edford. He informs Raul that he will depart for the Myers territory within the week and that his wish will come true. As Raul is led from the room, he wonders what wish they could possibly mean, cynically guessing it might be his wish to end his feudal life. He understands the part about his arm potentially being healed, but he is deeply suspicious of the sacrifice part. He imagines this twice-divorced healer must be an older woman, perhaps in her 40s or 50s, and guesses that husband is just a code word for being a human test subject for her drug experiments. Back in the office, Edford finishes a letter and tells Caius to send it, along with Lydia's resume, to the pharmacy, as Raul will be heading there directly. In the hallway, Raul pauses, resigning himself to his fate. He decides to follow the order as long as he is allowed to retire. He turns back to the doorway and asks what the prince meant, wondering aloud if it's just that they prefer their test subjects to be healthy. Edford simply smiles and wishes him well, advising him to be careful as it is still cold in that territory. Sometime later, Lydia and her friend Norn arrive back in the Margrave territory. As Lydia sighs in relief to be home, Norn teases her for being bored by their uneventful trip. Norn explains that the area used to be very dangerous, filled with bandits, until the Black Knight squadron cleared them out last year. This reminds Lydia of the news she heard about the Black Knight being forced to retire due to an injury. Lydia feels a pang of regret, thinking his injury must be very serious if the royal doctors couldn't fix it. She wishes she could have given him the special borrowing life poultice she and her teacher developed, which is known to work on old wounds, even if it causes a temporary fever. She worries for him, knowing that retired knights often have difficult lives. She decides that as soon as she gets to her shop, she will write to Prince Edford and send the poultice, just in case he's willing to try it. She then has a more practical thought, musing that a hero as famous as the Black Knight must have an enormous retirement bonus and would, in fact, make a very good husband. Arriving at her pharmacy, Lydia thanks Norn for the escort and invites her in for tea. Norn declines, explaining that she must first report to Lydia's father and deliver some items from Rios. Lydia understands and promises to have snacks ready for Norn's day off tomorrow, which Norn happily accepts. As Lydia walks up to her shop door with her luggage, she stops in confusion. A tall, blond man with a sword and a bag is standing on her porch. Lydia is momentarily stunned by his beauty. She wonders if he's looking for someone or if he thinks she is suspicious. The man turns to her and simply says, Lydia, a bit flustered, asks if she can help him. Assuming he's a customer, she tells him she will open the shop and asks him to wait. As she turns to unlock the door, the man stops her, calling her careless. He reprimands her, asking why a young lady would open her shop for a man she doesn't even know. Lydia is bewildered by his comment but chuckles, appreciating his concern. She reassures him that a barrier on the shop would activate if he tried anything. She then opens the door and invites him inside. As she enters, several small, rabbit-shaped creatures hop over, welcoming her home. The man, still looking unconvinced, follows her in. Inside, the man crouches down to look at one of the creatures, noting it's an odd and highly magical pet. Lydia, moving behind the counter, asks what she can do for him. She explains that the creature isn't a pet but a magical vacuum cleaner she's shaped like an animal because it's cute. The man then stands, his face serious, and states that he came because he heard she was looking for a sacrifice. Lydia is completely stunned by the word, sacrifice, and her mind immediately jumps to the idea of a test subject for her teacher's experiments. The man asks if she is the only pharmacist, and Lydia explains she has a teacher. The man immediately assumes this teacher must be the one recruiting for sacrifices. Lydia panics, unsure how to answer. The man asks where her teacher is, and when Lydia says she doesn't know, he says he'll go look for him. Lydia quickly stops him and checks the back room, where she finds a note. It's from her teacher, Tigrald, explaining he has left for a 2-week trip with Viscountess Merida Heath, and it's accompanied by a cartoon of them on a carriage date. Lydia sighs, knowing this is a romantic getaway for her teacher. She is now in a bind. Her teacher is gone for 2 weeks, and this handsome man has arrived to be a sacrifice. She decides she must talk to him and convince him to leave. She returns to the front room, briefly admiring the man's beauty. She explains that her teacher left yesterday for a medical trip and that she just returned from the capital herself, which is why she was unaware. She invites him to sit down. As Lydia pours him a drink, she introduces herself as Lydia, the pharmacist. The man replies that his name is Raul, then specifies, Raul Glaive. Lydia freezes in shock, almost dropping the kettle. She knows that name. It's the same name as the Black Knight. As she looks at him, she feels an intense pressure from his gaze. Raul then asks if she remembers him, stating that he remembers her as the pharmacist from the fort during the battle. Lydia is floored, asking if he is really Sir Raul, the Black Knight. He confirms it but tells her that just Raul is fine. Lydia has an internal meltdown, shocked that the man she admired from afar is this incredibly handsome. She quickly explains that she does remember the Black Knight, but she never saw his face under the helmet. Lydia quickly collects herself, asking him to wait. Her mind races as she tries to understand why the famous Raul Glaive would volunteer to be a sacrifice for her eccentric, MILF-loving teacher's experiments. Raul, mistaking her question, confirms her teacher's 2-week absence. He then asks Lydia why she became a sacrifice and if she was prepared to die. Lydia stares at him, confused, and her gaze drops to his left arm, which she realizes has been hanging limply at his side the entire time. She asks if he is here because of the injury that left him unable to move that arm. Raul quietly replies that it's not so much that he wants to die, but more that he simply has no reason to want to live. He clarifies that his dominant hand is his right, so he can still fight, but he just feels he has no reason to continue living. Lydia suddenly erupts, shouting, "Nonsense!" She angrily demands to know why he chose her store as the place to come and die. She says that if he dies there, it will destroy her teacher's reputation, who is already seen as a perverted and eccentric man. Raul coldly replies that this has nothing to do with her, as he came to see her teacher. Lydia fires back that it is relevant, and she absolutely refuses to allow him to become a sacrifice in her store. Pointing at him, Lydia declares that he only feels he has no reason to live because his mind is weak, and his mind is weak because his body is weak. Therefore, she will take charge of his medical treatment. She announces that he will stay at the pharmacy to recuperate until her teacher returns, and she will use him as a test subject for a new therapeutic drug. Raul looks at her, dumbfounded, and asks if she's implying that being a requires good health. He then smirks and says it's not. Lydia admits to herself that this is just self-indulgence and that she's shocked the man she admired would turn out this way, but she ignores his protest. Lydia grabs her luggage and stomps heavily up the stairs. She tells him he is staying there starting today and that all the amenities he needs are upstairs. She orders him to follow her, informing him that his treatment will begin tomorrow. To her surprise, after a brief pause, Raul quietly picks up his bag and follows her. As she leads the way, Lydia is surprised he's being so compliant, but she is firm in her decision. She will absolutely not allow him to be sacrificed in her store. Raul's treatment, which Lydia secretly thought of as house arrest, began with them having dinner together. As Lydia was in the kitchen chopping vegetables, she quickly became annoyed because Raul was standing extremely close, watching the entire cooking process with intense fascination. She complained that it was harder to cook with him hovering like that. Lydia reasoned to herself that since Raul came from the wealthy and historic Markgrave family, he would be used to servants and chefs and would have no reason to ever cook for himself. She also knew that even within the knights, nobles were treated differently than commoners. She then cheekily asked him if this meant she was the first woman to ever cook for him. Raul just laughed and replied that her choice of words was misleading. Lydia, slightly flustered, pointed to the table and told him to go sit over there, saying it was fine since no one was listening to them anyway. Lydia served the hot, steaming meal and wished him an enjoyable meal. Raul thanked her and, after taking a single bite, he immediately said it was delicious. Lydia smiled, visibly relieved, and admitted she had been worried because it was just a commoner's meal. She was glad it suited his taste. As they both ate, Raul asked if she always ate alone like this. He explained that the knight's cafeteria was always crowded, so he usually just ate there to get basic nutrition. He confessed that it had been a long time since he had actually eaten a meal with another person. Lydia replied that she was similar. Her teacher often ate while doing research, so she was also used to eating alone, either while reading a book or keeping medical records. She added that even when she returned to her family's mansion, she ate by herself. Raul, looking at his salad, quietly remarked that eating with someone is nice, and after a moment, he looked at her and agreed, "Maybe you're right." After the meal, Lydia served him a steaming cup of special herbal tea. Raul asked what it was. Lydia, still a bit flustered from his earlier comment, explained that it improves metabolism and is also effective for recovering from fatigue. As Raul drank it, he suddenly felt his body becoming very hot. Now sweating and flushed, he thought to himself that her appearance was a visual violation. Lydia, who seemed to be staring, told him to get some rest and said she would prepare for his treatment the next day. Raul, noticing her gaze, asked if he looked weird. Lydia blushed, thinking he was emitting pheromones and that she needed a shield. The next morning, Lydia woke to the sound of something slicing through the air, which was coming from the front of the store. She looked outside and saw Raul practicing with his sword. She was captivated, thinking he looked beautiful as he trained. She noticed he was struggling to use his injured left arm, but he still had some feeling left in it. Watching him from her balcony, she wondered why the doctors in the royal capital had failed to heal him. She reasoned that since he could still barely swing his hand, there must still be some sensation. If the nerves were still alive, there was a high chance magic could heal the injury. Her guess was that he was never truly healed at all. She suspected that because he is a national hero, the doctors may have made the injury worse or couldn't heal it, and they were likely just trying to save their own careers. Suddenly, Raul stopped and looked directly up at her, having noticed he was being watched. Lydia was startled and let out a little, Raul, now sweaty from his practice, walked inside and asked if the bathroom was upstairs. Lydia, flustered, asked if he was hungry. He just said he would leave breakfast to her and started to walk past. Lydia, forgetting her manners, yelled at him for being so exposed, then told him to go wash up while she made breakfast. Later in her room, Lydia felt restless as she held Raul's discarded shirt, noticing his scent on it. Just then, her friend Norn arrived. Lydia explained her decision to treat Raul's arm herself, and Norn had the same shocked reaction Lydia had earlier. Norn immediately became protective, grabbing Lydia and whispering to Raul, asking if he would dare try to put his hands on her. Lydia pushed her away, embarrassed, asking what she was talking about and insisting that was impossible. Norn, understanding the situation, offered to help, saying she would go shopping for him and let Natalie know about the treatment. As Norn hurried Lydia out the door to shop, Raul watched them go, thinking that it was time for the treatment to begin. Lydia, now in her professional coat, began the medical exam. She admitted to Raul she had been feeling nervous since last night. She explained she would now examine his body and asked him to roll up his sleeve, which he did. She warned him she was going to touch him now. As she examined the scarred tissue, she told him to speak up if it hurt. She diagnosed that his elbow was severely injured and the muscles were too damaged for him to bend it. She concluded that returning him to his previous condition would require 6 months of recuperation and rehabilitation. Raul asked her why she was contemplating it, stating that healing him was her job. Lydia argued that considering his quality of life after recovery was more important. She explained that just healing his arm would be pointless if he still intended to throw his life away, as that would defeat the whole purpose of the treatment. She then made a proposal. Since she was healing him, she expected him to live for at least 20 more years for follow-up observation. If he was so willing to be a sacrifice, he could live for her instead. Surprised, Raul simply replied, "I'll think about it." Lydia then explained the treatment, which involved the borrowing life poultice. It would concentrate his magic on the elbow, but she warned him to expect a high fever for 3 days due to the wound's depth. Raul, looking at her notes, asked if all her skills came from her teacher. Lydia clarified her knowledge came from her teacher, her mother, and other healers in the territory. This led Raul to talk about knighthood, explaining how armor is passed from master to apprentice, and he was his master's first apprentice. Lydia, flustered, just said her teacher was eccentric. 2 days later, Raul was in bed, suffering from the high fever as predicted. Lydia, with Norn present, noted his fever hadn't gone down and brought him medicine. Raul, sweating heavily, weakly agreed to drink it, muttering that she would have forced him anyway. Lydia, in full medical mode, cheerfully confirmed he knew her well. She helped him drink, hoping the fever would break by the next day. However, Lydia and Norn grew concerned as they noticed something unusual about his condition. On the 4th day of treatment, Lydia rushed out in a panic, exclaiming that his fever had risen. She and Norn realized this was a case of excess magic. Lydia explained that this condition is when the body overproduces magical power. In Raul's case, the medicine had concentrated magic in his left arm, creating an unbalance. His body likely misinterpreted this as a decrease in magic and began overproducing, causing a magical overflow. Lydia explained this was terrible. When his arm finally healed, all that pent-up magic would flood his system, causing saturation and, in the worst-case scenario, death. Norn, ever practical, immediately asked where the shovel was, saying she was going to find a good spot to bury him. Lydia shouted at her to wait, reminding her not to give up and start digging a grave, as Raul was still alive. Trying to think of a solution, Lydia realized she had to reduce his magical power with medicine. She announced she was going to collect the specific medicinal herbs needed for this. With her teacher gone, she knew it was all up to her. She knew this could last for weeks, and with grim determination, she vowed that she would never let him die. Lydia returns from the herb garden, holding a bundle of purple flower bulbs. She immediately warns Norn to be careful and not to touch them, as the flowers are unsafe. She explains that these plants, a type of foxglove, have the unique property of absorbing magical power and are known by the name Magic Eater. As Lydia begins processing the flowers, Norn looks on in horror, asking what she plans to do with them and noting that their bright colors are creepy. Lydia calmly confirms that yes, it is poison. She explains she is carefully extracting only the poison that absorbs magic power while separating it from the deadly paralytic toxins. This causes Norn to panic, realizing Lydia intends to make Raul drink it. Lydia admits that since this is an unprecedented treatment, she cannot guarantee it will work, but she feels it is the only way forward right now. Norn says Lydia's name with concern, as Lydia is overcome with guilt. She blames herself entirely, believing that if she had not insisted on treating him, Raul would never have developed the hypermagic disorder. She reflects that she must have been spoiled and complacent because she always had her teacher by her side to rely on. With renewed determination, she asks both Norn and her other friend to please help her administer the poison to Raul, as she is now absolutely resolved to save him. With the help of her friends, Lydia managed to get the delirious Raul to drink the poison, encouraging him to do his best. 10 hours have passed since that moment. Her friends eventually went home, realizing Lydia was in for an all-night vigil. Now alone, Lydia sits with a pillow, her resolve to save Raul unwavering. As she walks back to his room, Lydia worries, admitting to herself she has no way of knowing if his magic power is actually decreasing. Deciding it's time to check on him, she quietly enters and approaches the bed. She observes Raul and notices that he seems to be less sweaty than he was before. This prompts her to check his thermometer, and she is overcome with relief, exclaiming that his fever is finally going down. She can also see that his complexion is getting much better. Knowing this, Lydia hurries to prepare the antidote for the poison she gave him. Wiping sweat from her brow, Lydia sighs with relief, thinking that he has made it through the worst of it. She knows that when Raul finally wakes up, he will be fine once he takes some stamina recovery medicine. She reflects on how truly anxious and stressful the entire nursing ordeal has been. After the crisis passed, Raul slept peacefully in his bed and did not wake up for 2 full days. Lydia, seen writing at her desk, notes that she has really had enough of this kind of anxious excitement. At some point, an exhausted Lydia fell asleep, slumped over Raul's bedside, mumbling in her sleep. She is awakened when Raul, now conscious, quietly says her name. Waking up with a start, Lydia is surprised, and she notes to herself that this is the first time he has ever called her Lydia. Her concern immediately shifts to his health, and she asks him how his body is feeling. Raul, sitting up in bed, replies that he is fine. Lydia then asks the important question, what about his arm, and can he move it properly? Raul looks at his left arm, clenching his fist, and confirms that yes, it moves. Lydia is absolutely ecstatic, throwing her hands up and shouting her congratulations. Grabbing his hand, Lydia smiles, exclaiming how glad she is that his arm healed. She immediately shifts back into her pharmacist role, telling him he needs to eat, take his stamina recovery medicine, and change his clothes. Raul simply agrees to her rapid-fire instructions, while Lydia, still beaming with joy over the successful healing, rushes out of the room, saying she will prepare everything right away. Outside the room, Lydia pauses for a moment, a happy smile on her face as she thinks to herself that his arm is finally healed, and more than anything, that is what matters. Raul began to improve within just 3 days of waking up, and Lydia privately thinks his recovery is almost too fast. 2 days after that, Norn and several other knights came to visit him. Lydia and Norn watch as Raul engages in a mock battle, expertly wielding twin swords. Norn is visibly infuriated, admitting she is beyond envious of his amazing moves. Lydia simply smiles, thinking that it can't be helped, as he is the legendary Black Knight after all. Norn calls out to Raul, commenting that it doesn't look like he has slowed down one bit, while Raul, wiping sweat from his face, is clearly determined to get back to his full physical fitness as soon as possible. Sometime later, Raul is escorting Lydia to the guild, pushing a cart that transports her medicine and tools. Lydia expresses her concern, asking if it's really alright for him to be joining the knights' training already and telling him not to overdo it. Raul admits his wound still feels heavy, but explains that he just doesn't feel comfortable being taken care of all the time. He then begins to tease her, joking that even if he told her she could do whatever she wanted with his body, she wouldn't like that. A flustered Lydia tells him to stop talking like that. This coaxes a small smile from Raul, and Lydia is surprised, thinking to herself that he just laughed. Raul simply comments, "Even I laugh sometimes." Natalie, who is accompanying them, silently disagrees with Lydia, thinking to herself that she has never seen Raul laugh once since he arrived. Natalie then cheerfully greets Lydia and shoves a letter toward her, announcing that she has a letter from her father. Lydia is surprised and takes the letter, remembering that she had, in fact, informed her father about Raul's treatment. As Lydia reads the letter, she sees her father apologizing for his behavior the other day and informing her that he has already declined the marriage offer from the Viscount's family. However, he then writes that he would be overjoyed if the Black Knight were to become his son-in-law. He instructs Lydia to give Raul the best possible treatment, to get to know him, and to make absolutely sure that he never wants to leave. Lydia is utterly horrified, sighing and regretting that she ever told her father about Raul's treatment. She mentally screams at her father that Raul is not his future son-in-law and makes a note to burn this letter later. Later, Lydia and Raul are seen walking through a forest. This area is a sacred place, described as being similar to a power spot in Japan, where many precious medicinal herbs grow wild. Raul has accompanied her on her trip to collect medicinal herbs. As they look out over the landscape, Lydia mentions that she would like to collect some samples, and Raul simply says, "Got it." Lydia reflects that things have somehow changed between them since that morning. As she prepares to take a lunch break, Lydia thinks about Raul's future. She knows that now that his arm is healed, he doesn't truly need to stay there for rehabilitation anymore. She suspects he probably has an offer to return to the royal capital and that it might be a good idea for him to return early. She also admits to herself that she will feel a bit sad and lonely without him around. While she is lost in her thoughts, wondering when he might return to the capital, Raul suddenly calls her name. He looks at her and asks if she wants to know how he got injured. As they sit down for their picnic, Lydia is surprised, as she had been thinking he was about to talk about leaving. She tells him that he doesn't have to talk about something if he doesn't want to, though she smiles and clarifies that it is not because she doesn't care. Raul then asks if she feels like talking about it, to which Lydia just asks why. Raul looks away, explaining that it is a long story. He then reveals the truth to a shocked Lydia. he was cut by his own apprentice. He turns to look at her directly and asks if she will listen to his story. After a brief pause, Lydia meets his gaze and replies with a simple, yes. Raul explained that the armor he wears was something he won by competing against his seniors. He recalls that there was one man who fought him fiercely to the very end, and this rival's name was Dario Isidore, who was the second son of the powerful Duke and Minister of Finance. Raul continues, stating that he was 17 when he defeated Dario in their final exam, which is how he inherited his master's armor. After suffering this loss, Dario completely gave up the sword and fell into a depraved lifestyle, which eventually ruined his health and led to his death. Raul notes that while their families were not on the best of terms, he personally didn't feel strongly about Dario. Dario, on the other hand, was always extremely hostile and relentlessly tried to pick fights with him. This grudge was inherited by Dario's father, Lord Isidore, who blamed Raul for his son's death, especially after Dario's own fiancée gave up on him and ran off with another man. Because Lord Isidore hated Raul, he began using his political power to harass Raul, specifically targeting the Knight's Order's budget and staffing. The situation became even worse when Lord Isidore's daughter fell in love with Raul and requested an engagement. Raul, of course, refused this, and from that point on, Lord Isidore's resentment grew so intense that he began sending assassins to poison him, which causes Lydia to react in shock. Raul then connects the story to Lydia's home, asking if she remembers the battle that took place in her territory 6 years ago. Lydia recalls the event, remembering that Raul was the vice commander for Prince Edford's knights. She also remembers hearing that the commander at the time, a short-tempered man, had controversially burned down an enemy-occupied village while Raul was away. Raul confirms this and reveals that his apprentice, a boy named Dino, was a survivor from that very village. Raul had taken Dino in after the boy lost his family and had been personally teaching him how to use the sword. Then, Raul reveals the awful truth. 2 months ago, Dino stabbed him. He explains that Lord Isidore had cruelly tricked Dino, convincing the apprentice that Raul was the one responsible for burning his village. When Dino attacked, Raul's knightly reflexes caused him to cut his apprentice down instantly. When Raul came to his senses, he found Dino lying at his feet. Fortunately, Dino was rushed to a mage and managed to survive. Lydia asks what happened to his apprentice after that. Raul explains that he personally requested that Prince Edford secretly hide Dino, as he feared Lord Isidore would try to silence the boy to cover up his plot. Lydia is horrified that someone would exploit a boy's grief just to get back at Raul. The story notes that Raul was left to staunch his own wound and that it was 2 whole days before Sir Caius found him and forced him to get medical treatment. Raul concludes his story by explaining that when he discovered he could no longer move his left arm, he resigned from his position as Knight Commander. Lydia understands the difficult political situation, realizing it would be nearly impossible to pursue the Minister of Finance without solid evidence, and that Prince Edford's hands were tied. Raul felt his presence was only causing problems, and this is why he felt he had no reason left to live. Lydia looks at him and asks if he still feels that way now, and if he still wishes to be sacrificed. Raul looks down at his newly healed arm, marked only by a faint scar. He tells her no, he doesn't want to die. Instead, he wants to use the arm that she healed to protect something important. He admits that he feels pathetic and is confused, saying he doesn't know if he should live or even if he's allowed to be happy that his arm is healed. Lydia simply smiles gently and tells him that his desire to live is a good thing. She reassures him that his feelings are valid, but he may be overthinking things. She tells him to focus on what he's feeling right now, not what he thinks he should feel. She insists that it is okay for him to be happy, that none of what happened was his fault, and that there is nothing pathetic about him. Visibly moved, Raul turns away from her, and Lydia asks if he is crying. He denies it, claiming knights rarely cry, but Lydia knows he's just trying to hold himself together. In a sudden motion, Raul pulls her into a tight embrace, capturing her. Lydia understands this isn't a romantic hug, but rather his way of hiding his face so she cannot see his tears. As he holds her, Raul quietly says, "Thank you." Lydia feels a wave of happiness and relief, thinking how wonderful it is that she was truly able to help him. After that emotional breakthrough, Raul's demeanor begins to change, and Lydia notices his smile appearing more and more. With his rehabilitation underway, Lydia's only remaining tasks are to wait for her teacher to return tomorrow so she can finally get to the bottom of the sacrifice recruitment mystery. The next morning, she opens the shop and finds Raul already there to greet her. Lydia, with her hair down, enters the shop and says good morning, surprised he is up so early. She follows a wonderful smell into the kitchen, where she finds Raul wearing an apron that Natalie had given him, which Lydia thinks looks perfect on him. He is stirring a pot, explaining that he made a soup for her. Lydia is amazed, as she had only taught him a few simple recipes, but he was a quick learner and had already mastered several dishes. As she takes a delicious bite, she thinks he is a genius and feels like he is steadily winning her over with food. As she eats, Raul stares at her, and Lydia asks him what's wrong. He says it's nothing, he just finds it unusual to see her with her hair untied. Lydia is surprised, remarking that it's been a while since he called her careless. Raul admits he still thinks she is careless, but says he will let it slide because he is starting to think her carelessness is cute. Lydia freezes, completely stunned by his comment. Overcome with embarrassment, Lydia suddenly bolts from the kitchen. Raul, holding his ladle, calls after her in confusion, asking if she's not going to eat with him. Lydia, blushing, calls back that she'll be right back after she changes her clothes. Left alone, Raul just mutters. Back in her room, Lydia leans against the door, her heart pounding strangely. She feels feverish, breathless, and has the sudden urge to scream. She wonders what is wrong with her, guessing she must be overworked, and she muses on how caring Raul has become. The next day, Raul finds her in the shop and says there is something he needs to talk to her about. Lydia, noticing he's acting strange, asks him what's wrong and offers to make some tea. Raul, looking very determined, announces that he is not going to be sacrificed. Lydia says she already knows that. He then adds that he is also officially no longer a member of the Knight's Order. Lydia is a bit confused by this. Raul then looks directly at her and makes his declaration. From now on, he wants to live for Lydia. Lydia is so bewildered she can only respond with a questioning, okay? It takes a moment for his words to register, and then she shouts, huh? Raul explains that since she is the one who kept him alive, he wants to live for her. Panicked, Lydia holds up her hands and says she is sorry, but she doesn't need or want that. She tries to back away as Raul insists that because she saved his life, he wants to use that life to protect her. Lydia frantically refuses, telling him that's too heavy. She argues that she didn't save him from the goodness of her heart, she did it simply because she is a healer. Raul steps closer, ignoring her protests and saying that even so, he wants to stay by her side. Lydia, now trapped against a wall, argues that his logic is ridiculous. She says that if every knight pledged their life to the healer who saved them, they would have an army big enough to overthrow the country. She thinks that the knights in this world are far too quick to throw their lives away. Raul, however, doesn't listen to a word she says, his intensity completely different from when they first met. He leans in close and formally swears on his name, Raul Glaive, that for the rest of his life, he will be her sword and her shield. Lydia, terrified by his intensity, can only silently beg for someone to help her. At that exact moment, Natalie cheerfully enters the shop, calling Lydia's name and holding up a souvenir she brought. Natalie freezes the moment she sees Raul looming over a trapped and terrified Lydia. Immediately misreading the situation, Natalie apologizes for bothering them and turns to leave with a knowing look. Lydia, horrified, cries out for Natalie to wait and help, insisting that it is not what it looks like. Raul, however, ignores this and tells Lydia, "No matter what you say, I'm staying." Lydia is left in a state of pure panic, her heart feeling like it's about to burst as she wonders how this could have possibly happened.